I'm setting the over-under at 6 games for Joe Flacco to be the Browns starter this season. What about the other quarterbacks? We'll talk about it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Dog Pound? I'm Spencer German, your host of the Locked On Browns podcast. I'm proudly covering your Cleveland Browns each and every single day in the land and on the road. We know Joe Flacco has been named the Browns starter. When can we expect the rookie quarterbacks to play? Reason for concern over the Browns actually finding their identity on offense this season. And Isaiah Bond vows to prove the Browns right. Will he? We'll talk about it. All of that and more coming up. I do want to thank you for being on every day at the Locked On Browns podcast, making us your first listen every single day. Remember, you can find Cleveland Browns content with Locked On Browns every week, Monday through Friday, guaranteed, with bonus content on some weekends as well. And it's totally free to you. Just hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you get your podcasts. And, of course, at the Locked On Browns YouTube channel, where you can also get involved in the show by sharing your thoughts on anything we discussed today in the comment section. This is your team, so be part of the conversation every single day. And Joe Flacco is officially the Browns starter. We know that at this point. No surprise. It had sort of been trending that direction for several weeks now. But what I think is interesting now is as they sort through the rest of this depth chart of what's going to look like, and I am maintaining that I still think they're going to keep 4 quarterbacks. When will the rest of these guys play? And in particular, when will the rookies, Dillon, Gabriel, and Shedeur Sanders play as we sort of map this thing out? And so I think to get to that answer, you have to start by setting an over-under at how many games Joe Flacco is going to play first. And so for me, I'm going into it and I'm assuming that the over-under for Joe Flacco is going to be the first 6 games. I think it's silly that people even bother asking Kevin Stefanski at this point, like, is he your starter for the season or is this subject to change? He doesn't know. There's no, it is all going to be based off of how Joe Flacco plays. If Joe Flacco looks like 2023 Joe Flacco for the first 6 games, which is what I'm setting the over-under at, by the way, the 6 games, Bengals, Ravens, Packers, Lions, Vikings, Steelers, the stretch of the season that everybody is touting as a gauntlet for the Browns to open things up. If he goes out and he wins, 4 of those games and he's 4-2, he probably is going to keep playing through the Dolphins, Patriots, and Jets. If he goes out and they're 1-5 in that stretch, then yeah, I think that feels like the natural spot to make a change. But clearly Kevin Stefanski doesn't know how long he plans on starting Joe Flacco at quarterback. It's all going to be based on performance and based on the needs of the team at any given time. And so as things stand, he's going to start the year. I'm putting the over-under at that 6 games, that stretch that we just laid out. That's the quote-unquote gauntlet of the season that the Browns have. And I think that Dolphins game on October 19th is sort of the natural place where a quarterback change could be made. Again, assuming that Joe Flacco is struggling at that point in the season. Now, if he's not, he keeps going. But if he is, I think that's kind of the natural point where they would pivot to whoever the backup is. And in my mind, the backup is going to be Kenny Pickett. I know that's not going to sit well with some people. I know that's going to annoy some people. It honestly will annoy me because as somebody who thinks this team needs to evaluate both these rookies, if you're 1-5 at that point or 2-4 at that point, I get there's still like a season to fight for, and so why not give Kenny Pickett a go? But you also do need to evaluate these rookies on some level. And I think that the best way to do that is to give them as many games as possible to play. But I do think that Dolphins game is kind of where things set up nicely for the Browns to pivot to a different quarterback. And I think that different quarterback would ultimately be Kenny Pickett. And how many games does he get? I feel like you give him maybe the next 4. Dolphins, Patriots, Jets, Ravens, unless it's going really, really poorly. And then if it is going poorly, maybe then you pivot again to one of the rookies. If you continue losing and your season's kind of in the toilet, now you're talking about being like around Thanksgiving. There'd be 7 games to go, and you basically have 7 games to split between these 2 rookies, however order you want to see them. Now, I think it's pretty obvious at this point, based on where the Browns drafted Dillon Gabriel, based on their evaluation of Dillon Gabriel, based on how this quarterback depth chart and the managing of reps has been distributed to this point, I think it's pretty obvious that they would go to Dillon Gabriel before they go to Shedeur Sanders. But I think that Raiders game sort of sets up nicely if you get to that point in the season where you can sort of pivot to one of the rookies to start and start getting a better sense of like, okay, here's who we have in one of these guys, as you get a softer matchup, if you will, against a Raiders team that isn't supposed to be very good. And honestly, like the end of the season is, it's not as bad as the beginning of the season. Now that middle portion is the softest. You get a Patriots team that, yes, new coach, you feel good about that if you're a Patriots fan. And hopefully the Patriots, for their sake, start turning things around. But it's like the Jets, the Raiders, after you play the Ravens, the 49ers, who I think are going to actually take a step back this year and be worse. I think the Titans aren't going to be very good. The Bears are sort of, I don't know. They're a big question mark right now with Caleb Williams. And then the Bills, Steelers, Bengals is a tougher stretch to end the season. But again, like you want to give these rookies the most friendly matchups for them. And I think that Raiders game sort of sets up as the place to do that. It's not the number of games that I would want for these rookies. If it was up to me, the Browns would only be keeping 3 quarterbacks. And it would be Flacco to Gabriel and Shedeur in some order. And after you get to that first 6 games, the Dolphins game is where your sort of natural point is that week 7 is kind of the natural point to be like, okay, time to make a change. Let's see what we got in these rookies. And that actually gives you, instead of the 7 games, it gives you now 11 games that you had to sort of split between the two. And maybe one gets 5 and one gets 6 or whatever you want to do, however you want to sort of distribute it. But you need to leave this season with some evaluation of these guys on the football field and not just in practice and in the team meeting rooms. Like that stuff matters. Yes, it does. But as I've talked about, like, for example, with Shedeur, something you can't always account for in the team meeting rooms, on the practice field, is just like that gamer that gamer idea, that gamer mentality where you just kind of go out and when the lights are on and you're playing on that field, you just kind of ball. And Shedeur has that. I think you saw Dillon looked his most efficient, in certain situations. He was great on 3rd down, for example, in his preseason debut. And so those are the types of things that, like, you want to see him in a game, because sometimes in practice, they're just not working. They're just not clicking. So you want to get the best evaluation of these rookies that you can. If it was up to me, you'd only keep 3 quarterbacks, and then you'd have more games to sort of evaluate them. But in terms of like the over-unders on all these guys, I think Flacco, the first 6 games makes sense. And it's part of the reason why I think they were always going to start a veteran week 1, no matter what they said about the quarterback competition. I do think they framed it wrongly by making it sound like everybody had a fair shake. They didn't. But I think the plan was always to start one of these start one of these veterans and try to get through that 6-game stretch to start the year where, it's just an absolute gauntlet and you play a lot of good teams, pretty much all playoff teams from last year, other than the Bengals, who were a fringe playoff team if they had won just one more game. And then I think it sets the tone for whatever direction I guess you want to go at the quarterback position. Maybe by then a team needs a quarterback and you trade Kenny Pickett. Who knows? But I think that first 6 games makes sense for an over-under for Joe Flacco. And I do think in an ideal world, you get each of these rookies at least 4 to 5 games so that you can evaluate them the best. And what does that mean for Kenny Pickett if he's still on this roster, which I'm predicting right now he will be, remains to be seen. We'll have to wait and sort of see. But I think that Dolphins game in week 7 becomes the natural point to pivot to a different quarterback. In an ideal world, it's the rookies. But I don't know that we're living in an ideal world here with the Cleveland Browns, and you just never know with them. So we'll see. But in terms of when you could see these rookies, I wouldn't bank on it being before week 7. And I don't even think you should bank on it if they keep 4 quarterbacks. I think you're talking even later in the season. I think you're talking more like week 12, week 13, down the stretch after Thanksgiving, that time of year is when you could potentially see Shedeur Sanders or Dillon Gabriel play for this team. Speaking of the quarterback position, they are going to be the conductor of this offense, and we know what they want their identity to be. Can they pull it off, though, especially without some key players? We will talk about it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. This episode is brought to you by Yahoo Fantasy. It's the best time of year. NFL kickoff is almost here. And that means Yahoo Fantasy, or fantasy football, is back in full swing. And this year, Yahoo Fantasy is turning things up with a fantasy football experience like never before. My most competitive league that I play in is on Yahoo Fantasy. It's the most fun I have playing fantasy. And my friends and I are always having a blast doing it. you can too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your millionth league. To celebrate 28 years of fantasy greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days through the month of August. To kick it off, they just dropped their Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine Leagues, a killer new way to play fantasy football on Yahoo, where the lowest scoring team gets eliminated each week until there's just one team left standing. With the season around the corner, now's the time to get your league together and give this new mode a try. Or if you're more into the classics, you can still play in a head-to-head private league, or even start a public league or join a public league. Stay tuned for more killer announcements and start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football now at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. All right, so the identity of this football team obviously starts with who's under center. And now that we know Joe Flacco is going to be that guy, it sets the stage for this offense to sort of start clicking, rolling. Use this week as a game-like week in preparation for the Los Angeles Rams on Saturday to get themselves all acclimated on the same page, get that just get that morale and chemistry going and all those different things. And so we'll see how that all kind of comes together over the course of this week, how it continues to come together over the course of this week. But here's the thing, we've been talking a lot about the fact that the Browns are trying to go back to the roots of Kevin Stefanski's offense. No more of this catering an offense towards one player, catering an offense for Deshaun Watson. He's not going to be out there this season, if at all. And so there is now you're going back to what you do best. And frankly, I think it's the Browns are better for it. I think Kevin Stefanski's better for it as a play caller. And I think he's going to have more success just naturally because he's able to go back to this offense that he, ran and started when he came here and that he was hired to run. So that stuff all is important, but at the base of that offense, at the root of what they want to do is running the football. And that's not a secret. The Browns love to do play action off of a lot of these things in Kevin Stefanski's offense. It's what made Joe Flacco so successful in 2023 when he was here, was the fact that they could, they didn't have a great run game that year, but it was good enough, and Flacco was just slicing and dicing. But here's the thing. The Browns this year cannot possibly bank on Joe Flacco dropping back 40 to 50 times a game the way he did in 2023 and just slinging it all around the football field and thinking that that's going to win them a lot of football games. They just don't have. The Browns don't have the playmakers in the passing game to be some explosive, high-octane offense. They have Jerry Jeudy, and they have David Njoku, who I still have some questions about. Something just still seems like it's not there with him physically. We'll see if it translates when the regular season begins. But I still have some doubts about him as a legitimate weapon still at this point. And if he's still the player that he was at that point in time in 2023 when he became a Pro Bowler, we'll see. But it's those two guys who are sort of the more proven commodities, and then a bunch of unproven players. It's Cedric Tillman, who the Browns are hoping takes a leap, and I hope he does too. And I think this last week he's actually shown some signs. You've heard his name called more often. He's made some more plays at practice and in the preseason. It's Jamari Thrash, who he's at a brilliant camp. I'm really excited about Jamari Thrash and what he kind of brings to the table here. But also, again, unproven, just year 2 in the league. It's Harold Fannin, who they are clearly trying to incorporate in a big way already throughout training camp in the preseason, but has to prove it on an NFL football field. And they're going to be running a lot of 12 personnel, so that might help their cause as well, to have him and Njoku both out on the field, obviously together at the same time. But, again, unproven. And that's the big thing. They don't have – I'm not banking on the Browns having this explosive passing game. And so having Flacco drop back 40 to 50 times is just not necessarily a recipe to win a lot of football games this year, assuming that's the goal. They want to at least try to win initially. And I know to a degree that worked in 2023, even without a great passing or even without a great running game. But we also saw that it has an adverse effect and that Flacco is very turnover prone. And it's the thing that everybody went back to after they lost in the playoffs to the Texans, was like, oh, this game's on him. I still say it was more on the defense than him, because neither of those pick sixes came until the second half. And they were already in a big hole at that point, and Flacco was just trying to make things happen. But that's a different conversation for a different time. Flacco is pick 6 prone. He's going to take some of those chances. He's a gunslinger. It's what he does. And the Browns need to avoid the turnovers at all costs. That's part of the reason why Jameis Winston is not back this year. It's part of the reason why they pivoted away from doing what they did a year ago and why Ken Dorsey was fired. Like, the offense was an utter disaster in 2024. They committed too many turnovers. They cannot have that, derailing their offensive drives, and also giving the defense a lot of short fields to defend again, because it's why they won 3 games last year. And so I don't know that you want Flacco doing that. And so at the basis, of all this, at the root of all this, is getting back to running the football. And in the way they drafted, I think they told you that's the goal. They drafted Quinshon Judkins. Then they drafted Dillon Sampson. They added 2 running backs here that they thought were going to sort of provide this 1-2 punch in different aspects of the passing game, the running game, and be this dynamic duo. And rightfully so. I appreciate the vision that they're trying to create there. But now Quinshon Judkins isn't here still. We don't know when he's going to get his contract signed or that situation resolved. Sounds like the Browns are at least waiting for the NFL to finish their investigation into the matter and see if he faces a suspension before any deal is agreed to. And so they're going to likely be starting the season without him. And that could just derail the Browns' identity from the start, because if they can't run the football from Jump Street, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to get better as the season goes on. It could, because sometimes a lot of teams start the year slow and then figure it out. But the Browns want to hit the ground running. They got this 6-game gauntlet where they're playing all these playoff teams from last year, where they want to be able to just exude their will and do what they want to do from Jump Street. They don't want to have to be waiting around to take 6-7 weeks to rev up and get there. But that might end up being the case if you don't have Quinshon Judkins. That's not to disrespect Jerome Ford, Dillon Sampson, etc. I think those guys are fine players. Sampson, I think, had a very specific role sort of set out for him, and now it's going to probably be more on his plate because Quinshon's not there. So he's going to have to handle a little bit more early on. And it's not that I don't think he can handle it. It's not that I don't think Jerome Ford is a at least solid player. I think he's proven over the last couple of years he can be a reliable generally back for you. But do I think he's going to set this offense up for great success? Not necessarily. And it's also where the offensive line comes into play. That group staying healthy is so pivotal to the season, so pivotal to the Browns figuring out their identity. They want to control the clock. They want to run the football and then set everything else up off of that. Have Flacco be able to air it out, take some deep shots, all those different things on occasion, because they're running the football. And to this point in training camp, I don't know that we've seen them do that consistently enough. So I'm curious if there's I am a little bit concerned about what that part of the offense, the key part of the offense, looks like without your star running back, with an older offensive line that's going back to what they should be able to, what they thrived in, the system that they thrived in. That's the good news. But will it translate on the field? Will it actually play itself out that way? Will that offensive line stay healthy? Those are all big questions. And if they can't, I think the offense is certainly going to be in trouble, especially without Quinshon Judkins, who I think is the back that no one's going to be Nick Chubb, but you were hoping that Quinshon was kind of the guy that was an eraser at times. If there was a mistake made, or if there was a guy missing on the offensive line for a game or two because of an injury, he could make up for it because he has the ability to sort of get small, get in those holes, and then blow and then burst through and get to the second level and make big plays. Again, not saying he's Nick Chubb 2.0, but you draft a running back where you drafted Quinshon because you think he can make those plays for you. And so it's unfortunate that he's not there to be able to provide that for you. It just almost feels like this run game might start the year just kind of average and be waiting for Quinshon to kind of come in. And by then, it might be too late. But it also is contingent on the offensive line play and the offensive line staying healthy. And those are big problems. Those are big ifs as well. So as the stage gets set for this weekend's game against the Rams, the preseason finale, which is being treated like a final dress rehearsal, I am going to be paying close attention to what the run game looks like, the offensive process. If the offensive line is having some success, getting some push and opening up holes for these running backs in the run game, that stuff is all going to be important for them to hit the ground running. It's all going to be important to the Browns figuring out their identity and establishing their identity early on in the season. And so that's what I think is important about Saturday's game. And what is the final dress rehearsal is seeing if that run game has come along even a little bit more. Isaiah Bond, where does he fit into the offense, as he vowed on Tuesday to prove the Browns right in the decision that they made to sign him? We'll talk about it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. Have you ever decided at the last minute that you just want to head to a ball game with your friends or family. Maybe it's a game day and suddenly you realize, hey, I just want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Game Time comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, too, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group to come with you. Game Time makes it all possible. They make buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop as you get closer to first pitch, and they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and the lowest prices guaranteed. That takes the worry out of buying tickets. Last year, I used Game Time for the first time. I bought tickets for my wife and I to go see Ohio State, Michigan. We were obviously disappointed by the results, but we did get to say we saw the eventual national champs in person. And with their transparent ticket pricing and panoramic seat views during the pre-buying process, Game Time became my go-to app for buying tickets. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply again. Just create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, so we joke about Isaiah Bond being the perfect player for those Kevin Stefanski end-around plays, but he actually how he actually fits in this offense is something to monitor, is something to watch. I don't know if we're going to see him play on Saturday or not, if he can get integrated that quickly. We will see. He was actually asked about that on Tuesday, and he said, time will tell. You'll have to just sort of wait and see about his status for Saturday. And so we'll see if he's part of it. He was out there on Tuesday, running around, running routes, catching passes, being integrated into the offense. You saw some of his speed at times. I think there's still obviously a learning curve for him. I think it's going to take him some time here. Luckily, he's got 3 weeks before the season starts, or a little under 3 weeks now until the season starts. So it's not like he has to, pick it all up immediately and go out there and play a game on Sunday. But he does. If he wants to be ready for week 1, he's got 3 weeks to sort of figure this thing out as he sort of joins the fold late here. There's some others, like we'll talk more here in a second about like the fit, what it all means, what it looks like, etc. Because I have my doubts about him being a real contributor to this team, and I'll explain coming up. But I did think it was an interesting conversation with Isaiah Bond in his introductory press conference that he did. He came prepared with a statement in terms of, his legal situation, how he's putting it behind him. He's just focused on football. This is a dream come true. He's grateful to the Browns for giving him the opportunity. All the cliche things that you would expect him to say. It kind of sounded like he had rehearsed it in the mirror the night before over and over again. He came out ready to deliver it to the media. And I guess that's just, again, when you're in a situation like he was in, I guess that's just the way that these things go. You get a lawyer to tell you to put a statement out, and you just kind of go from there. And you hope that it sticks. And he talked about doing community service, which, I mean, I get it. I don't know if in that setting you need to say it because it almost then feels contrived if you do. But at the same time, listen, like he I think does want to prove to people that he's not the person that was accused of sexual assault. And then the charges obviously were dropped and he's free to sign wherever. And so here he is in Cleveland with that opportunity. He talked a lot about proving the Browns right. And there is a world where this pans out and he turns out to be a contributing factor for this Browns team. And, nobody really bats an eye at the legal situation if he never gets caught up in anything like it again. And it ends up being water under the bridge. And it's all good. But I do have my doubts about that as a whole in terms of like how where he fits into this. And I think part of this for me comes from just like, I don't know, like it's football fans like you and me, but it's also like NFL teams. We have seen over the course of time, NFL teams fall in love with just pure speed. And there are so many times where like the pure speed thing just doesn't ever amount to a player that ends up being much of anything in the NFL. We saw it here in Cleveland with Andrew Berry. In fact, Anthony Schwartz came to Cleveland. A lot of anticipation, a lot of high hopes because he was lightning quick. He was so fast. And what happened with Anthony Schwartz? Well, in some ways, Anthony Schwartz is kind of the reason the Browns are where they're at. Because if he runs that one route, Baker Mayfield doesn't throw an interception that then he's trying to make a tackle on and messes up his shoulder. And maybe we're talking about it in a whole different universe where Baker Mayfield never leaves Cleveland. Who knows? So Anthony Schwartz didn't pan out. Now I know like Isaiah Bond had more He has more of a reputation in terms of like his football prowess than Anthony Schwartz did, I would say, coming out of college. People know him more. He was a number one at Alabama and then a number one theoretically at Texas. But that's my other part here. That's my other problem here is that the lack of production as a number one wide receiver and just purely being fast, like we didn't see it from him in college either. Like he didn't put up massive number one wide receiver numbers at either spot in college that he played. And you're talking about Alabama and Texas. Like those are two top tier programs that certainly would look to a receiver of that caliber if they felt like he was going to give you what you were looking for. And he should be able to produce in those places. It was just kind of weird that he never showed that production, that he transferred out of Alabama to go be the number one in Texas, and it never really came to fruition. Now, you could argue some of that could be quarterback play. I know Quinn Ewers was inconsistent at times last year, fine, but he never eclipsed 1,000 yards. Like he never put up. I just think when you're talking about a player and your evaluation is rooted in like how fast they are, and I'm not saying that isn't part of the evaluation and not something that you would look at, but I just think that there has to be production to sort of complement everything else that they have from a football standpoint. And we didn't see it. I went back and looked in Daniel Jeremiah's The Beast that he puts out, the NFL draft guide, and just some of the weaknesses here that stand out to me are that, you know, he struggled adjusting to the deep ball when it wasn't on point. He's obviously not much of like a tackle breaker because he's a little undersized. Obviously didn't play on special teams. It was noted on here. He was a little inconsistent with his hands at times. There were some other notes I had caught at another point where it was like he still needs to refine his route running ability at times and sort of finish routes. Now, he did say that he can run the entire route tree, and I do think that that's true from his time at Alabama and Texas. Like, you are going to be asked at those two places to run more routes than most receivers, and so that's a good thing. And I will say this, Isaiah Bond also talked about how he looked up to Jerry Jeudy, and it's a guy that he sort of sees as a mentor, and so he's excited to play with him. And Jerry Jeudy is one of the best route runners in football, I would say, in the NFL. He's really good. So maybe that's somebody he can lean on to refine some of those things and get better. But I just don't know. Like we bank so much off of just like pure speed, and that's why I joked like, yeah, it's all fun to laugh about Kevin Stefanski finally having a player he can use on those end around plays and maybe do it more successfully. But if that's all you're sort of counting on this player for, and that's all you think that he's really going to bring to the table, I'm not saying the Browns do. Like, yeah, he can take the top off of defense, but to what level, how consistently can he do that? We still have to see those things play out. There was a list I saw of players that were basically like the same stature as Isaiah Bond, like under 6 foot, ran a 4.4 40. And most of the list were just like okay players to bad players. There was a few that stood out. Deshaun Jackson was like one of the only ones that stood out as like a guy who really went on to have like a prolonged and fruitful NFL career. So with that in mind, I just want to see, we need to see more before we start crowning Isaiah Bond as any one thing in this offense. And it's a process that still has to play out, but I don't know. I'm not saying that he can't. But I wonder about the fit, and I wonder about his transition to the NFL, and if he ends up being as reliable as a player that the Browns are maybe banking on here in bringing him in and signing him. That's all. But we'll see. He has a chance to prove it to us, and we'll see if he gets his first chance to do that starting on Saturday in the preseason game with the Rams. Another episode down with the Dog Pound. Thanks for joining me as always to talk about your favorite football team. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make Locked On Browns your first listen every day. We'll have plenty more to talk about from practice on Wednesday and throughout the rest of the week. I do want to get into the players that have the most to prove in 2025. So some good stuff still to come. For your second listen, check out Locked On Fantasy Football with Vinny Lyer and Michelle Madjuk. Listen every day to prep for your fantasy draft and become the most informed manager in your league. Or, as always, you can keep it local. Check out Locked On Cavs or Locked On Guardians. Thank you for being every day at the Locked On Podcast Network. I will talk to you again real soon, Cleveland. See ya.